Welcome to Older Military Radio TV, where lifelong Catholics and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for Holy Mother Church. We'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're picking up where we left off, where Agent Sniper is exposing MI5 as not the best and brightest tools and sharpest tools in the shed. We were talking about Harry Frederick Putin yesterday, and today we're going to pick up where we left off. It was a decision made easier by his growing resentment at what he considered ill treatment by his employers and an unhappiness with his wife. An internal MI5 letter noted, investigations have shown that during his time there in Warsaw, he was disgruntled over living conditions, inefficient at his work, and drank to excess. His wife did not take to life in Warsaw and seemed to have contributed to the low state of her husband's morale. During the time in Warsaw, relations seemed to have deteriorated steadily, and toward the end of their tour, Mrs. Houghton sustained a broken leg, possibly as a result of violence on the part of her husband. The British authorities in the 1950s took no interest in the home lives of their employees, even when these included evidence of domestic abuse. Houghton's other activities should have raised serious concerns, according to an MI5 summary of his wife's subsequent testimony. About 2 or 3 months after the Houghtons arrived in Warsaw, Houghton started going out between 9 and 11 on Wednesday nights and returned with bundles of used English banknotes. Houghton used to explain these nocturnal disappearances by saying that they were connected with his black market activities. Before long, Amy Houghton had additional cause to worry. Houghton began making regular late-night phone calls. He always turned his wife out of the room before making these calls, and she would hear him talking in soft tones. He would also brought Polish nationals to the home, again kicked her out of the room, and refused to tell her who the visitors were. Unsurprisingly, Mrs. Houghton began to suspect that her husband had been recruited as a spy and asked him if he was working for the party. He replied that he intended to string him along with the side which paid him the most money. A disgruntled naval clerk with unsupervised access to highly classified documents, who was semi-openly trading on the black market and holding late-night discussions with citizens of hostile power, should have been noticed by the Admiralty, but even the security panic, which had followed the defections of Burgess and McLean 2 months earlier, the Navy took a lofty view of its duty to protect the privacy of its employees, as explained in the subsequent attempt at self-justification. After Burgess-McLean case, it was only the greatest reluctance that the government accepted the obligation to keep an eye on private lives and habits of public servants outside their places in times of duty. Even then, they set strict limits to the doing of this, confined to those known bad habits, and were much criticized for going even so far. To go further, an institute a direct system of continuous spying is an excess of the government's policy announced after Burgess and McLean in excess of what the nation would stand. We reject McCarthyism in this country at whatever price. But if keeping a watchful eye on a clerk who exhibited clear signs of treachery was beyond the pale, clerical incompetence was taken far more seriously. By the end of 1952, the naval attaché, one Captain Austin reached the end of his patience, as he subsequently told MI5's investigators. As naval attaché's clerk, he thought Houghton was fairly incompetent and typed with his toes, judging by the results. He found his personality unattractive and noticed he was drinking heavily. This had not, however, persuaded Austin to restrict or even monitor Houghton's access to classified material. He could, the attaché admitted, quite easily have taken papers from the embassy for quite a long period without their disappearance being noted. Nonetheless, the limited typing and heavy drinking were apparently inexcusable. In October 1952, Harry Houghton was sacked from his job at the embassy and sent back to England. Before he left, he carried out two final tasks. He sold a large quantity of contraband to his black market contacts and met with the Polish intelligence handlers to arrange his transfer to new masters, the KGB. But Houghton's personal problems and poor performance in Poland appear not to have given the Admiralty any pause for thought. Within weeks of his return from Warsaw, it reassigned him to the underwater detection establishment, a highly sensitive research unit based in Her Majesty's Naval Base at Portland, Dorset. Here, for the next 7 years, he had access to the research and testing results on some of the Navy's newest weapons. So you see the idea of passing the buck and passing the torch, or moving around traders, is something that came from the Rothschilds and MI5 and all these guys. And when we have Bergoglio doing this with that high level case of protecting that pedophile, and also the bishops who protected these enemies of God by just putting them in different parishes, we can see now where this idea of just shuffle the deck, make sure they don't aren't noticed or anything. It's like, we can all see now where it comes from. Thanks to Agent Sniper, we have to see it. The posting, however, did not ease his sense of grievance, nor his willingness to take out his unhappiness on his wife. He was drinking more heavily than ever, spending between 10 and 20 pounds a week, equivalent to 225 to 240 pounds today, in pubs and off licenses. This instant alcoholism took an inevitable toll on the couple's home life. In March 1954, Amy Houghton wrote to her husband's employees, begging them to give him another chance in the Warsaw embassy. He feels a great injustice was done to him when he was withdrawn from the Warsaw, and he still has that on his mind. I know now he was accused of many things that were untrue, that he was unable to defend himself of accusations. The purpose of this letter is to ask you if you allow him to go back to Poland. The Department of Naval Intelligence appears to have ignored the letter and the evidence that the Houghtons posed a potential security risk. It would not be the last time that the DNI turned to a Nielsen blind eye to a problem in plain sight. By autumn 1955, Mrs. Houghton had enough. She walked out of her home and shortly afterwards made a second attempt to sound the alarm about her husband. This time she reported her fears that he was a spy. A note dated on June 1956, when MI5 discovered in Admiralty files, was clear and unequivocal. During the course of recent welfare inquiries, it is understood that Mrs. Houghton alleged that her husband was divulging secret information to people who ought not to get it. The Admiralty, however, dismissed Mrs. Putin's warnings of out of hand, Blithering pronouncing hitherto that there has been no question of Putin's integrity. It is considered not impossible that the whole of these allegations may be nothing more than outpourings of a jealous and disgruntled wife. They managed to reach to this remarkable conclusion by other corroborative evidence of espionage at Portland, as MI5 noted. We also now know that in June 1956, an executive officer of UDE Portland reported to a security officer that certain classified files, which were missing from the strong room, subsequently returned surreptitiously after a search had been instituted, were thought to have been seen on Houghton's desk. In describing the incident, the executive officer mentioned Houghton's apparent affluence in his mysterious trips to London. It must be assumed either that the executive officer's report was orally or that his written report failed to reach Houghton's personal file. Yet only positive action taken by the Admiralty was to transfer Houghton to a different department within the naval dockyards, where, noted, it is believed he no longer has access to classified material. It was too little, too late. As MI5's investigators showed, Houghton already recruited a sub-agent. As a filing clerk in an underwater detection establishment, Ethel Bunty Gee routinely handled top-secret documents, including details of Britain's first nuclear submarine, HMS Dreadnought. A spinster with little social life, she was 9 years younger than Houghton and became his lover. She also supplied him with classified papers for onward transfer to the KGB. By May 1960, MI5 and MI6 had come to the reluctant conclusion that the information provided by sniper Lavina had exposed a spy and one who the Admiralty had been rather less lackadaisical about security should have been detected several years earlier. Houghton had all the elements which any intelligence service would look for when considering a target for recruitment. He had difficulties with his wife. He was dissatisfied with his living conditions. He was unsatisfactory at his job. Did not get on well with his superiors. He was inclined to drink and was cautioned at least once about it. He was in general thoroughly disgruntled. Get some water here. MI5 duly assigned cryptonyms to Houghton and Gee, Reverberate, Reverberate, and Trellis. From that spring onward, watchers from local police and security services A4 branch kept the pair under near constant surveillance. They reported that the couple frequently drove up to London for a clandestine rendezvous with the mysterious and given the drabness of London in mid-1960s, somewhat flamboyant businessmen. It seemed probable that the man was Houghton and Gee's handler, but cross-referenced his photo with that of all known Soviet bloc intelligence officers. Resident tourists who operate semi-openly under diplomatic cover inside Soviet bloc embassies produced no match. He was completely unknown, raising the unpleasant specter of a hitherto undetected espionage range. Tugging on this single strand of Lavina's information had begun to reveal something far bigger and more dangerous. It also firmly established in British minds, at least, his credentials as a reliable source. So the CIA began wanting to know answers and demanding them from the MI5 about the security breach. Internal correspondence between one of the investigators and MI5 management recorded the dilemma. I agree that the latest information goes a long way to establishing the reliability of Lavina. May I now take you up again on the point which we discussed recently in my office, namely whether anything can be said to CIA at this stage on the progress of your investigations. John Bryant, MI6 liaison officer in Washington, D.C., has always been tackled on this point by CIA headquarters, and with your agreement, I told him that CIA could be informed that your investigations were proceeding satisfactorily, that nothing had emerged so far which in any way invalidated the information provided by Lavina. Would you now be agreeable to CIA being told A, that an interview with River Ray's former wife has provided information strongly suggesting that River Ray has been engaging in espionage for a number of years. B, that he has had a girlfriend with current access to UD Portland. C, that on recent visits to London, he and Miss Ski were observed to make a clandestine contact. D, that your conclusions from the above lead you to think that River Ray still has current intelligence role. The last item is particularly important as Ingleton has always maintained that one of the weakest features of Venus reporting has been that he has given no leads to any current Polish or Russian intelligence service agents. To learn that Reverate was still an active spy would go a long way towards silencing the critics of Lovina. By the end of the 1950s, the balance of power in Western intelligence had shifted away from London and was now firmly in the grips of Washington, D.C. Britain's diminishing world role in the rise of American power, and compounded by the Burgess-McLean scandal. And the CIA was very much the senior partner with MI5 and MI6 relegated to junior status. According to British intelligence chiefs, decided to offer up only guarded conclusion that there were firm indication that River Ray had spied and that there were indications that he may currently active and have recruited a sub-source who has more access to classified information than he has. No mention was to be made to Ingleton on Putin and Gee's mysterious businessman contact, or the possibility of wider and much more dangerous espionage ring. Nor with the original source still operating undercover behind the Iron Curtain, was it possible to arrest the British suspects. Doing so would almost certainly alert Moscow to the existence of a mole within the KGB or its satellite agencies. For the moment, MI5 could only step up its surveillance on Houghton and Gee to try to assure the CIA that Sniper Lavina had delivered vital, genuine intelligence. MI5 did not know because the CIA chose not to inform it that England's grumblings about Sniper were completely unfounded. Sniper had, as Washington well knew, already identified other Soviet spies in 3 other Western countries, and their individual stories all showed that American intelligence had been severely compromised. So that is the end of the tip on the part of London and MI5 and MI6. And we're going to skip over Stockholm, Sweden, and Munich, Germany, and a few other Western nations. And we're going to finish up on Monday this book on Agent Sniper for you, where he exposes the first Prime Minister of Israel and tell the truth about the real state of Israel and why it is nothing but cloak and daggers. This is Order Military Video TV signing off. Asshole.